It's time to talk about the future, Theros, and some very interesting cards. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about a spoiled card for the upcoming Theros Beyond Death set. Now what I want to do is talk about some other cards that are connected to this card first, and then dive into why this card is actually as interesting as it is, basically. That's what I'm going for here. So, we're going to start out by looking at Medea. I always wanted to call him or her Medomi. Anyways, it's Medea the Ageless. This is a Sphinx from the original Theros set. 1 blue, 1 white, 4 colorless for a 4/4 flyer. Whenever Medea the Ageless deals combat damage to a player, take an extra turn after this one. But Medea the Ageless can't attack during extra turns. This is a funky concept for a Sphinx. Obviously, when it comes to Sphinxes, they tend to have otherworldly knowledge, or at least more knowledge of the world, right? One of the commonalities between most Sphinxes is that they're interested in riddles. If you can bring them a riddle that they haven't heard before, they will reward you, or at least let you survive in their presence, whatever the reward is. Either some knowledge, some treasure, or just sparing your life. Either way, that's the concept behind Sphinxes. It's interesting to see it played out here, where Medea just gives you free attacks. Like every time you manage to land a blow, it's like, oh look, this Sphinx actually has enough magic that they can alter the flow of time with their crazy mystic arcane abilities. Very cool, but also interesting that it's limited in a way by the fact that you can't attack during extra turns. Obviously, if you could, it would just be an infinite turn machine, right? Just on one card, which clearly would be broken. It would basically be like, if it deals combat damage to a player, you win the game, because you're just going to get to rinse and repeat the process over and over and over. But either way, that's Medea. Now, there's not much in the way of lore about this Sphinx. This is a Sphinx that would show up to the city of Miletus and make these sort of proclamations, show up and spew prophecy, basically. Just show up sometimes as a harbinger of good, sometimes of ill, as the predictions that were made weren't always to the city's favor, right? It wasn't always something that was going to help the citizens out. It was just something that was going to happen. That's not a good time. When you have a Sphinx show up and be like, yo, guess what? I know the future. I know how things are going to go. You can't change the future. And here's what's going to happen. And you just know from previous experience, oh my lord, this guy actually has these abilities. So when he makes these prophecies, they are going to come true. We're hosed. We got a fat hose on our face, and nobody likes that. No, well, some people do. Let's not get sidetracked. So, Medea actually only, up until this point, only had an appearance on his card and one additional card in the form of Swan Song. Swan Song is 1 blue instant, counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller puts a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying onto the battlefield. And the flavor text says, the most enlightened mages create beauty from violence. And that's Medea the Ageless. The Ageless, I should say. Man, having a hard time with my words today. I'm not the smartest guy. What are you going to do? So, Swan Song is actually a really interesting card insofar as the insight it gives you to the power of Medea, right? We already know that he can control time. He has some sort of aspect of chronomagery about him. Well, Swan Song gives you a little bit of an idea of his philosophy with the most enlightened mages can basically make beauty from violence. And that means in this case, oh, you're about to cast a lightning bolt or cast some sort of violent damaging spell? Well, the Swan Song is going to turn that into a graceful bird. I really like the idea as well, because in most cases when you see some sort of transmogrification, it will be one living creature into another living creature. With this sort of Swan Song scenario, are these actually like natural, genuine birds that are like birthed from this magic? It's an interesting concept. Instead of actually like summoning constructs or summoning the original birds, is it actually creating birds? So that's interesting. But what I find more interesting is the fact that this card illustrates that Medea in some ways would have more power than the gods, because all the gods on Theros are all enchantment creatures, and all of everything they create is also enchanted and enchantment style. So if they summon beings or anything, all the beings the gods summon also are enchantments made up of the same god stuff, right? But Swan Song can counter an enchantment. That means that it would be the type of power required to nullify a god or the creations of the gods. And that's pretty interesting in terms of demonstrating Medomai's power. So Swan Song is the only other card that references Medomai up until Theros Beyond Death releases, at which point at least one more card is being added. We don't know everything that's in the upcoming set, so I can't say for certain this is the only card that is referencing Medomai's prophecy, because I have no idea how much this prophecy may play into the storyline, or whether this is just a cool saga design because they wanted to bring sagas back. And let's be real, this is a very cool saga design from a flavor standpoint, and actually even from like a power level standpoint. This seems like a pretty solid uncommon to throw into a constructed deck. So let's take a look at it. It's 1 blue and 1 colorless. It is a saga. So as the saga enters the battlefield and after each of your draw steps is when these sort of cards trigger. If you're not familiar with sagas, if you weren't around for Dominaria, that's the only other place they had sagas. And sagas are essentially an entire story on one card. Now, most of the sagas we've had up until this point have been things like History of Benalia. There was the one that was dealing with the Ice Age. So basically, they cover different chapters of Magic's history and longer stories, like there's one about the Brothers' War, things like that. So normally a saga previous to now would be something centered around like an established Magic story. Medomai's prophecy right here is more, at least at this point, just a conceptual prophecy idea as a card. And I actually like the way they've executed. So let's go through the abilities here. The turn you put it out, you are on the first act or whatever, however you want to break it down, the first time portion of your saga. So you put it out and scry 2 right away. So a blue and a colorless, you get to scry 2 right away, even if they end up dealing with the enchantment. The second turn, you choose a card name. So the turn after you put it out, you're going to choose a card name. Then the next turn after that, and this is interesting to me too, because you choose a card name one turn, but the effects of that don't actually happen until the next turn, which is not normally the way that it goes with Magic cards, but I'll explain how it does make sense flavorfully. So it is cool. Anyways, on the third turn, basically what you get to do is whenever you cast a spell with the chosen name for the first time this turn, draw 2 cards. So you get to cast the spell that you said you were going to play the turn before, but you get to draw 2 cards off it. And then the final step is to look at the top card of each player's library. So right away for 2 mana, you're guaranteed to get to scry for 2. And then 2 turns later, you'll have the, and I mean, if you play with Proliferate, you can actually speed this up too, right? If you put counters on it, then, because they use lore counters. So you can add more lore counters to speed the process up if you want. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. You might want to double check that just in case for some reason I'm wrong. But I think that how it works is every time you add a counter onto it is when you get to use one of the abilities. But if it doesn't work that way, then adding counters to it's just going to hasten your way through it and not trigger the ability. So that I'm not 100% on. I feel like that's the way it works, but I could be wrong. Anyways, let's just set that aside and look at it from a perspective without any kind of proliferating. So you scry 2 right when it comes out. Then the next turn you choose a card name. Then the turn after that you are actually casting that spell and drawing up to 2 cards. If you get those 2 cards, then all of a sudden for 2 mana, you got to scry 2, you got to draw 2, and then you're also going to get to look at the top card of both yours and your opponent's library in the final act of this particular saga. So to me, honestly, for 2 mana, that seems like you get a lot. I have no idea how good it'll be in like a more of a draft format, but it seems like it's got some constructed potential for sure. And you can actually use it as a way of messing with your opponent, right? You can make it sound like you have a spell that you don't have at all, because basically one of the trade-offs here is you have the knowledge ahead of time to your opponent in terms of I'm going to cast a spell next turn, and that's the trade-off for getting to draw 2 cards. So your opponent can prepare for it, know that it's coming. but you can also just name a card that you're not going to play or don't even have in your hand to mess with your opponent and make them think something different is going on, right? So it is a valid kind of bonus bluff strategy. Now, the artwork on this is pretty funky. You've got the Greek-looking brazier there with the smoking hot coals, and the smoke is billowing upwards. You got Medea there, presumably like towering over the city of Miletus. You've got the starry night sky in the back representing the gods, but Medea looks really impressive there, just kind of perched on the city. Now, for me, this is really cool overall flavor-wise as well, because when you actually break it down, this is literally Medea stating a prophecy, right? So the first stage, Scrying 2, is actually seeing the future, which is what you're doing, right? You're seeing what's coming up on your deck. That makes perfect sense. The second step, where you choose a card name, that's pronouncing out the prophecy to the city. So basically, Medea sees what's going to happen in the future. He proclaims it in the second step to the city of Miletus. The third step is the prophecy actually coming to pass. That's where what you say happens. And in this case, prophecy, obviously you reap rewards by drawing cards. But step 3 is literally the prophecy realized. And step 4 is starting it all over again, seeing the future, seeing what's coming next. And that is really awesome. I really like that as a flavor concept. It ties together really well. Overall, I gotta say, I dig this card. I am down with this card 100%. So I don't know if you guys, does it resonate the same way with you? Do you enjoy this concept? Do you think it's a cool card? Also, do you think that it's actually going to be any good in Standard, or am I way off base here? Because, I mean, I tend to play a massive, like, 200 card green deck in Standard. So it's not like I'm the king of the meta. You know what I'm saying? But either way, let me know what you guys think. I thought this was a really cool card. I like looking at individual cards and pulling apart the flavor. For me, it adds so much more to the game than just the pure mechanics of it. But either way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link to a number of videos here at the end. Some will be for this channel. Some will be for my other channel where I'm making funny videos. Just click on whatever looks enjoyable to you. We'll keep spending some time together. Thanks for coming by, everybody. Big shout out to my patrons and channel members. Appreciate you all very, very much. And remember, my friends, together we are the 6th color of magic.